My brother-in-law Derek called CPS on me as a joke and put peanut oil on my food, knowing I'm allergic. At my mother's funeral, he interrupted my eulogy to ask if she left him anything. When Sarah had a miscarriage, he sent a sympathy card with a cartoon stork that said, "Return to sender." The morning of our wedding, Derek insisted on driving me to the venue to make things right and handed me a flask as a peace offering. My brother-in-law Derek was the kind of guy who thought pranks were a personality trait. You know the type. The guy who calls Child Protective Services on you as a joke when you're babysitting. The one who puts peanut oil on your food knowing you're allergic because it's just a little bit. Don't be a puss. I'd been with my wife Sarah for 6 years when we got engaged. Derek had been a thorn in my side since day one. He was 5 years older than Sarah and had this weird complex about being the protective big brother, even though what he really protected was his own ego. The first time I met him, I was picking Sarah up for our 4th date. Derek answered the door holding a bloody knife and wearing my girlfriend's clothes. "Sarah can't come out right now," he said, fake sobbing. "There's been an accident." I literally called 911 before Sarah came running down the stairs, mortified. Derek was on the floor laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. The cops who showed up were not amused. Derek told them I was mentally unstable and had a history of false reports. It took Sarah an hour to convince them not to take me in for psychiatric evaluation, but Derek's awfulness went way beyond stupid pranks. When Sarah's dad was hospitalized for chest pains, Derek called me from a blocked number pretending to be the hospital. He told me Sarah's father had died and I needed to break the news to Sarah. I drove to her work sobbing, pulled her out of a meeting, and held her while I told her dad was gone. She collapsed. Her coworkers called an ambulance thinking she was having a panic attack. We raced to the hospital to find her dad alive, confused, and Derek in the corner with his phone out, recording our grief faces for his buddies. He once put a dead raccoon in our bed while we were on vacation. Our house smelled like death for months. He'd used our hidden spare key, which he found by following Sarah home and watching where she put it. The cleanup cost $3,000. Our landlord nearly evicted us. Derek said we should have had a sense of humor about a little roadkill. At my mother's funeral, Derek showed up late during my eulogy and loudly asked if she'd left him anything in the will. When people turned to stare, he said, "What? She loved me. I was basically her favorite son-in-law." Then he winked at me. My grieving father had to be physically restrained by my uncles. The man had a gift for weaponizing everything sacred. When Sarah had a miscarriage, Derek sent us a sympathy card with a cartoon stork that said, "Return to sender" on it. Inside, he wrote, "Everything happens for a reason. Maybe you're just not father material yet, Jake." Sarah found me in the garage with that card, sobbing and punching the wall until my knuckles bled. He once called my work pretending to be a detective, telling them I was under investigation for child-adult films. I was suspended for 2 weeks while they investigated. Even after it was proven false, people looked at me differently. 2 of my female coworkers requested transfers. Derek's response? "Builds character, bro. Now you know who your real friends are." Derek would break into our house just to F with us. We'd come home to find all our family photos replaced with pictures of him. Our wedding china smashed with a note saying, "Oops." Our mattress soaked in what we hoped was just water, but smelled like pee. We changed the locks 4 times. He always found a way in. Here's what unalived me. Sarah was trapped. Their mom died when Sarah was 15 in a car accident. Derek had been driving. He walked away without a scratch while their mom bled out in his arms. He'd been different before that, Sarah said. Normal. The guilt broke something in him, twisted his need to protect Sarah into this sick compulsion to control her life by terrorizing anyone who got close. I understood. I really did. But understanding didn't make it easier when he unalived my dog. Oh, he claimed it was an accident. Said he was trying to feed Max chocolate as a joke and didn't know it was toxic. But I saw him research it on his phone the week before. I found the screenshots he sent to his friend joking about solving Jake's mutt problem. I held Max as he died at the emergency vet, Sarah sobbing beside me, Derek in the waiting room asking loudly if we were going to get a real dog next time. But our wedding? Our wedding was supposed to be different. Sarah had finally snapped after Max died. She'd screamed at Derek, told him he was sick, that mom would be ashamed of him. She threatened to never speak to him again if he ruined our day. Derek had broken down crying, saying he didn't know how to stop, that he needed help. He started therapy, started medication. For 6 months, he was almost normal. I should have known better. The morning of our wedding, Derek was suspiciously helpful. Too helpful. He insisted on driving me to the venue. Said he wanted to talk, brother to brother, make things right. In the car, he handed me a flask. "Peace offering," he said. "One shot to bury the hatchet forever." What happened next would destroy the most important day of our lives. I stared at the flask in my hand. Derek watched me with that fake, earnest expression I'd seen 1,000 times before. The same look he had when he swore he didn't know peanut oil could unalive me. The same look when he promised he'd never hurt Max. My throat was dry from nerves already. One shot couldn't hurt, right? Maybe it really was a peace offering. Maybe therapy had actually worked. I unscrewed the cap and took a swig. The whiskey burned normal going down. Derek smiled and took the flask back, taking his own drink. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the morning sun glinting off his windshield. I started to relax. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe her brother really had changed. Then the world tilted. It started subtle. Just a slight wobble in my vision, like standing up too fast. I blinked hard, gripping the door handle. Derek was talking about the weather, about how perfect it was for an outdoor ceremony. His voice sounded like it was coming through water. My tongue felt thick, heavy. I tried to ask him to pull over, but the words came out slurred. Derek glanced at me with concern that looked almost genuine. "You okay, buddy? You look a little green. Wedding nerves?" I shook my head, or tried to. The movement made everything spin worse. My hands were going numb. This wasn't whiskey. This wasn't nerves. This was exactly what I should have expected from Derek. The venue appeared through my swimming vision. Sunset Gardens, where Sarah and I would say our vows in 3 hours. dreams, where 200 guests would watch us start our life together, if I could stay conscious that long. Derek parked and came around to help me out. I tried to push him away, but my arms felt like wet noodles. He slung my arm over his shoulder, practically carrying me toward the entrance. Little too much liquid courage, huh? He said loudly as we passed the catering staff setting up. Don't worry, I'll get him some coffee. Wedding day jitters, you know? I wanted to scream that he'd drugged me, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. All that came out was a groan. The caterers smiled sympathetically and went back to arranging flowers. Derek deposited me on a bench near the bridal suite. Through the fog in my brain, I heard him talking to someone, the wedding coordinator. He was explaining that I'd been up all night with food poisoning but insisted on coming anyway. Such dedication, such love for Sarah. Maybe we should delay the ceremony, the coordinator suggested, her voice worried. No, Derek assured her. He'll be fine, just needs to rest a bit. I'll take care of everything. I'm the bride's brother after all. Those words sent ice through my veins. Derek taking care of everything was exactly what I was afraid of. He left me there and I fought to stay conscious. I had to warn Sarah, had to tell someone, but my phone was in my jacket pocket and I couldn't make my fingers work to get it. Every time I tried to stand, the world spun violently and I collapsed back onto the bench. Time blurred. People passed by, setting up chairs, carrying flowers. A few stopped to ask if I was okay. I tried to form words, but Derek always appeared just in time to explain about the food poisoning, the nerves, the long bachelor party. Everyone nodded knowingly and moved on. Through my haze, I watched him work. He moved through the venue like he owned it, talking to vendors, checking arrangements. To anyone watching, he looked like the perfect supportive brother-in-law, but I saw what others missed. The way he whispered urgently to the DJ, how he slipped something to one of the catering staff, the satisfied smirk when he thought no one was looking. My groomsmen arrived and found me slumped on the bench. Joni, my best man, knelt in front of me with genuine concern. I grabbed his shirt, trying to pull him close enough to whisper, but Derek materialized again. Food poisoning, Derek explained smoothly. Poor guy's been puking all morning, but you know Jake won't let anything stop him from marrying my sister. Joni helped me to the groom's suite. The other guys were already there, getting dressed. They propped me in a chair and someone brought water. I sipped it carefully, praying it would help clear my head. Dude, you look rough, Benjamin said, adjusting his tie. Sure you're gonna make it? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The room kept sliding sideways, but I gripped the chair arms and held on. I had to make it. Had to stop whatever Derek was planning. Someone helped me into my tux. My fingers were too clumsy for the buttons, so Joni did them for me. In the mirror, I looked like death, pale, sweating, eyes unfocused. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Maybe we should tell Sarah, someone suggested. No, the word came out clearer than I expected. Everyone looked at me. So Derek's been playing the concerned brother-in-law while Jake's clearly been drugged? The timing of that flask in the car, the fake sympathy about food poisoning. I'm curious what Derek's real game is here. I swallowed hard and tried again. Don't worry her. I'll be fine. The truth was, I couldn't let Sarah see me like this. She'd know immediately what Derek had done. And if she confronted him now, before the ceremony, he'd play innocent, act hurt, maybe even convince her I'd gotten hammered on my own. I needed to get through this without giving him that satisfaction. Time jumped again. Suddenly I was standing at the altar, Joni beside me, holding me up. The chairs were full of guests. My vision swam, but I forced myself to focus on the aisle. Sarah would walk down that aisle any minute. I just had to stay vertical until then. The music started. The wedding party began their processional. Each bridesmaid seemed to take forever, floating down the aisle in slow motion. My legs shook. Sweat dripped down my back. Then the music changed. Everyone stood, and there was Sarah. She was radiant. Even through my drugged haze, she took my breath away. Her dress sparkled in the sunlight, her smile bright enough to power the city. For a moment, I forgot about Derek, forgot about the substances, forgot everything except the woman I was about to marry. But as she got closer, her smile faltered. She saw my face, saw how I swayed slightly despite Joni's support. Her eyes narrowed with concern. When she reached me, she took my hands and I saw the question in her eyes. I squeezed her fingers and managed a smile. We could do this. We had to do this. The officiant began speaking, but his words sounded muffled. I focused on Sarah's face, on staying upright, on not ruining this moment. Somewhere behind Sarah, I could see Derek in the front row, watching with that same fake concern. The rings? The officiant said. Joni reached into his pocket. His face went white. He checked his other pocket, then his jacket. Nothing. I had them, he whispered. I swear I had them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah's grip on my hands tightened. This was it. This was Derek's plan. No rings, no wedding, or at least a ruined ceremony that everyone would remember for the wrong reasons. Looking for these, Derek stood up from his seat, holding up the ring box. He smiled apologetically at the crowd. Found them in the groom's suite. Must have fallen out of someone's pocket. Good thing I double-checked. He walked up and handed them to Joni with a pat on the shoulder. The crowd relaxed, chuckling at the near miss. Crisis averted, thanks to the helpful brother of the bride. But I saw the truth in his eyes as he returned to his seat. This was just the beginning. The ceremony continued, but I barely heard it. My responses came out slurred but passable. Sarah kept shooting worried glances at me. When it came time for the kiss, I nearly missed her lips entirely. Somehow we made it back down the aisle as husband and wife. The moment we were out of sight, Sarah pulled me aside. What's wrong? And don't say food poisoning. I know you better than that. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come properly. Her face darkened as understanding dawned. Derek, she said. It wasn't a question. Before I could respond, the photographer appeared, ushering us toward the garden for pictures. Sarah held my arm, keeping me steady as we posed and smiled. Every flash made my head pound. During a break, I saw Derek talking animatedly with the catering manager. They both looked concerned. The manager hurried off and Derek approached us. Small problem, he said, not looking sorry at all. Seems there was a mix-up with the catering order. They're saying they have us down for next Saturday. Sarah's face went pale. That's impossible. possible. I confirmed 3 times. I have the emails. Derek shrugged. Technology, right? Anyway, they're scrambling to put something together, but it might not be exactly what you ordered. He walked away before Sarah could respond. She stood frozen, her perfect day crumbling around her. I wanted to comfort her, to fix this, but I could barely stand. The reception was a disaster in slow motion. The replacement food was wrong, cold, or missing entirely. The wedding cake, a 3-tiered masterpiece Sarah had designed herself, mysteriously fell off its table just before cutting. The DJ played funeral music during our first dance, claiming his playlist had been corrupted. Through it all, Derek was everywhere, helping, apologizing, being the perfect brother trying to save his sister's day, and I was too drugged to stop him. The photographer returned with more demands for group shots. I stumbled through each pose, Sarah's arm locked around mine to keep me upright. Derek positioned himself in every photo, always managing to stand next to me where he could steady me with fake brotherly concern. His grip on my shoulder felt like a vice. During the cocktail hour, I watched Derek move through the crowd like a shark. He cornered the band leader near the bar, gesturing wildly. The man nodded reluctantly and hurried away. Derek then intercepted our wedding planner, Victoria, pulling her aside for an urgent conversation. Her face grew increasingly worried as he spoke. I tried to follow, but my legs wouldn't cooperate properly. The substance was wearing off slowly, leaving me with a pounding headache and cotton mouth. I grabbed a glass of water from a passing server and downed it, then another. My vision was clearing, but I still felt unsteady. Sarah found me leaning against a pillar. She pressed a cold cloth to my forehead, her touch gentle but her expression fierce. I could see the war playing out behind her eyes, concern for me battling with fury at her brother. She helped me to a quiet corner where we could talk without being overheard. I managed to explain about the flask, watching her face transform from confusion to understanding to rage. She started to storm off, presumably to confront Derek, but I caught her arm. We needed to be smart about this. Derek had already laid the groundwork with everyone, painting me as sick and himself as the helpful brother. A confrontation now would only make us look bad. Instead, we developed a plan. Sarah would handle damage control while I focused on recovering enough to function. She assigned Johnny to shadow me, making sure I was never alone and vulnerable to whatever Derek might try next. Benjamin would keep an eye on Derek, tracking his movements without being obvious. The reception hall doors opened and guests began filing in for dinner. The seating arrangements had been changed. I could tell because Sarah's carefully crafted seating chart was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Derek had apparently reorganized everything. My elderly grandmother was seated next to the speakers. Sarah's conservative aunts were at the same table as my college friends who still acted like frat boys. Every combination seemed designed for maximum discomfort. Derek appeared at my elbow as I surveyed the chaos. He patted my back with false sympathy, explaining loudly to nearby guests how he'd had to step in when the original seating chart was accidentally destroyed by a catering mishap. Such bad luck, but wasn't it fortunate he was there to help? The first course arrived, if you could call it that. Instead of the carefully selected appetizers Sarah had chosen, guests received what looked like leftovers from a discount buffet. Cold spring rolls with freezer burn, wilted salads with brown lettuce, some kind of gray paste that might have been hummus in a previous life. I watched our guests politely pick at their plates, trying to hide their dismay. Sarah's boss pushed food around with his fork, clearly unimpressed. My father attempted to eat his salad before discreetly setting it aside. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing moment. Sarah worked the room like a professional, apologizing for the catering mix-up and promising better things to come. But I could see the strain in her smile, the way her hands clenched when she thought no one was looking. This was her dream wedding turning into a nightmare, and we both knew who was responsible. The band began setting up on stage, and I noticed immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't the jazz quartet Sarah had hired. Instead, 5 guys in ripped jeans and death metal t-shirts were plugging in electric guitars and adjusting a massive drum kit. The lead singer had face tattoos and a mohawk. Victoria rushed over to me, nearly in tears. She explained that Derek had told her the original band had food poisoning, and these were the emergency replacements he'd arranged. She'd trusted him because he was family. Now she realized her mistake, but it was too late to fix it. The main course arrived, and it was somehow worse than the appetizers. Overcooked chicken that could have doubled as shoe leather. Vegetables boiled until they were gray mush. Rice that was simultaneously burnt and undercooked. Several guests had already given up on eating entirely. Derek made rounds at each table, playing the concerned brother. He apologized profusely for the catering issues, hinting that perhaps the venue was to blame. Maybe they'd double booked. Maybe their regular staff had called in sick. He was just doing his best to salvage things for his beloved sister. The death metal band launched into their first song, a screaming rendition of what might have been a love ballad if you could understand any of the words. The volume was deafening. My grandmother covered her ears. Several children started crying. One of Sarah's coworkers actually got up and left. I forced myself to stand, still wobbly but determined. If Derek wanted to play games, I'd play too. I made my way to the band, gesturing for them to stop. The lead singer paused mid-scream, looking confused. I explained there had been a mistake, that they weren't supposed to be here. The singer pulled out his phone, showing me Derek's text messages hiring them specifically for a wedding reception. He'd been told the bride and groom were huge metal fans who wanted to shake things up. Derek's playing puppet master with metal bands and mystery meat while the groom can barely stand straight. This wedding's turning into a reality show nobody signed up for, complete with strategic seating chaos and vanishing ring tricks that would make a magician jealous. The payment had already been transferred. They were just doing what they'd been hired to do. I convinced them to take a break while we sorted things out. The sudden silence was deafening. Guests looked around uncertainly, unsure what would happen next. This was my chance to regain some control. Working with Johnny and Benjamin, we scrambled to salvage what we could. Johnny had connections at a nearby restaurant and managed to arrange emergency catering delivery.